The notification sound still makes my stomach drop, even 6 months later. That cheerful little ping that once filled me with hope now sends ice through my veins. But back then, in my cramped apartment in Cedar Grove, scrolling through Tinder at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday night, I was just another lonely guy looking for connection. Her name was Sarah, and her profile was refreshingly simple. No bikini shots, no party pictures with friends whose faces were scribbled out, just a single photo of her sitting in what looked like a cozy coffee shop. Dark hair falling softly around her face. Eyes that seemed to look directly into the camera directly at me. Her bio read, "I love deep conversations and really listening to people. Sometimes I think I understand others better than they understand themselves." I almost swiped left. Too good to be true, right? But something about her eyes held me. They looked kind, but there was an intensity there that made me pause. Before I could overthink it, I swiped right. It was a match. Her first message came within minutes. "Hi Marcus. I saw in your profile that you work in software development, but I get the feeling that's not what really defines you. What's something about yourself that you never tell people on first dates?" Most conversations started with "Hey" or "How's it going?" This was different, personal. It felt like she was already peering past the surface. And honestly, after months of meaningless small talk with other matches, it was refreshing. I found myself typing a longer response than usual, telling her about my photography hobby, how I wandered the streets at night taking pictures of empty places, how there was something beautiful about spaces where people used to be but weren't anymore. I hit send before I could second-guess myself. Her reply came fast. "That's fascinating. There's something profound about emptiness, isn't there? Like it reveals truths that presence obscures. I'd love to hear more about what draws you to those spaces. Do you ever feel like they're trying to tell you something?" No one had ever asked me that before. Hell, I'd never even thought about it that way. But as I read her words, something clicked. Those empty streets, those abandoned parking lots bathed in fluorescent lights, they did feel like they were trying to communicate something. Something I couldn't quite grasp. We talked until 3 a.m. that first night. She asked questions that made me dig deeper into thoughts I didn't know I had. About loneliness, about the spaces between people, about the weight of being truly seen versus just being looked at. She seemed to understand things about me that I was only just discovering about myself. When I finally forced myself to go to bed, I felt more connected to another human being than I had in years. The next day at work, I couldn't concentrate. I kept checking my phone, waiting for her next message. When it came during my lunch break, my heart actually skipped. "I was thinking about our conversation last night. You mentioned feeling invisible sometimes, even in crowded rooms. I have a theory about people like who speak and sense things others can't. Have you ever just known something about a person the moment you met them?" I stared at the message for a long time. Because yes, I had experienced that. Many times. I'd walk into a meeting and immediately know who was lying about being prepared. I'd pass strangers on the street and feel their sadness like a physical weight. I'd always assumed everyone could do this. But when I'd mentioned it to friends in the past, they'd looked at me like I was crazy. All the time, I typed back, "I thought everyone could do that." "Oh, Marcus. No. They can't. You have something special. Something rare. I'd love to help you understand it better. Would you like to meet for coffee tomorrow? There's a place called The Grind on Maple Street. Quiet, not too crowded. Perfect for the kind of conversation we need to have." My hands were trembling as I typed my response. "Yes. What time?" 7 p.m. "And Marcus, bring that camera of yours. I have a feeling you're going to want to document this." That night I could barely sleep. Part excitement, part nervousness. But underneath it all was something else, a humming sensation in my chest, like anticipation mixed with dread. I kept thinking about her phrase, "the kind of conversation we need to have." There was something ominous about those words, but I pushed the feeling aside. The next evening I arrived at the Grind 15 minutes early, camera bag slung over my shoulder. It was exactly as she'd described, dim lighting, scattered tables, the kind of place where people came to work alone or have intimate conversations. I chose a table in the back corner and waited. She walked in at exactly 7 p.m., looking just like her photo but somehow more intense in person. Her dark hair seemed to absorb the coffee shop's warm lighting, and those eyes, God, those eyes seemed to see right through me. She spotted me immediately and smiled, but it was a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Marcus," she said, sliding into the seat across from me, "you look exactly like I expected. Sensitive, observant, carrying weight you don't understand yet." "Thank you for meeting me," I said, suddenly feeling awkward. I have to admit, I'm not sure what this conversation is supposed to be about. She leaned forward, her fingers wrapping around her coffee cup. Tell me, when you take those night photographs, what do you see in the empty spaces? I thought about it, really thought about it. Echoes, I guess, like the feelings people left behind are still hanging in the air. And you can feel them, these emotional echoes. My heart was starting to race. Sometimes it's that weird, she laughed, but it was a cold sound. Marcus, what you have isn't weird, it's powerful. Some people are born with the ability to sense and absorb the emotional residue others leave behind. You're what we call an emotional sponge. And that, my dear, makes you incredibly valuable. Valuable to who? Her smile widened, and for the first time, I noticed her teeth were too sharp. To people like me, Marcus, people who feed on emotions but can't generate them ourselves. We need people like you to collect them for us. The coffee shop suddenly felt too warm, too small. I don't understand what you're talking about. Oh, but you do. She reached across the table and placed her hand over mine. The moment her skin touched mine, I felt a pulling sensation, like something was being drawn out of me. You've been collecting emotional energy your whole life without knowing it. All those feelings you absorb from empty places, from people around you, you store them inside, and I can take them from you. I tried to pull my hand away, but I couldn't move. Her grip was impossibly strong, and the pulling sensation was getting stronger. I could feel something draining from me, not blood, not breath, but something essential. Stop, I whispered, but she just smiled wider. You came here willingly, Marcus. You invited me into your life. That's all the permission I need. Her voice was changing, becoming layered, like multiple people speaking at once. All those lonely nights scrolling through dating apps, all that desperate need for connection, it created a perfect opening. People like you practically glow on those platforms. Emotional beacons calling out to things like me. The room was starting to spin. Other customers in the coffee shop continued their conversations, completely oblivious to what was happening at our table. I could see them talking, laughing, but their voices sounded distant and muffled. The beautiful thing is, she continued, her grip tightening, this doesn't have to be a one-time thing. I can keep you, Marcus. Keep you collecting for me. You'll go back to your apartment, back to your life. But now you'll be working for me. Gathering emotional energy from everyone around you, and I'll come to collect it whenever I need to feed. Please, I managed to gasp. She whispered, and suddenly the pulling sensation intensified. I could feel pieces of myself, memories, feelings, experiences being drawn into her through that point of contact. My first kiss, the grief I felt when my father died, the joy I experienced when I got my first job, the crushing loneliness of moving to this city, all of it flowing into her like water down a drain. Just when I thought I might pass out, she released my hand. I slumped back in my chair, feeling hollow, empty in a way I'd never experienced before. She looked exactly the same, but her eyes were brighter now, almost glowing. There's a good boy, she said, gathering her purse. I'll be in touch soon. And Marcus, don't even think about deleting your dating profiles. In fact, I want you to be more active on them. Cast a wider net. The more lonely, desperate people you interact with, the more emotional residue you'll collect for me. She stood to leave, then paused. Oh, and that camera, start taking pictures of people, not empty spaces. Capture their emotions. It'll make the collection process so much more efficient. I watched her walk out of the grind, my hand still tingling where she'd touched me. I sat there for another hour, staring at my reflection in the coffee shop window, trying to understand what had just happened to me. When I finally made it home, I caught sight of myself in the bathroom mirror. I looked the same, but my eyes looked different, darker, hungrier, and I realized with growing horror that I could already feel it starting, that pull toward other people's emotions, that need to absorb their feelings. My phone buzzed, a new Tinder match. Despite everything that had just happened, despite the terror clawing at my chest, I found myself reaching for the phone because the hunger was already there, and it was growing stronger by the minute. The notification read, "It's a match. Start the conversation with Jessica." I stared at Jessica's profile picture, a young woman with kind eyes and a genuine smile. Someone who probably still believed in love, still hoped for connection. My fingers moved to the keyboard without my conscious decision. "Hi Jessica," I typed. "I saw in your profile that you're new to the city. That can be lonely sometimes. Want to talk about it?" I hit send, hating myself with every fiber of my being. But the hunger was so strong now, and Sarah's words echoed in my mind. "You'll be working for me." Jessica responded within minutes. "Yes, it has been really lonely actually. Thanks for asking. Most guys just want to know what I'm wearing, lol." As I read her message, I could feel it, the emotional energy radiating through her words. Loneliness, hope, vulnerability, all of it flowing through the screen and into me like a drug. And God help me, it felt good. Three weeks had passed since my encounter with Sarah, and the hunger inside me had grown into something monstrous. I'd matched with dozens of people, each conversation more draining than the last, not for them, but for me. I was becoming a conduit for everyone's emotional pain, and something was feeding on it through me. That's when I matched with David. His profile was simple, almost sparse. A single photo of him sitting alone at what looked like a diner, staring out a window, mid-30s, brown hair, wearing a simple gray hoodie. His bio read, "Looking for someone who understands that some memories are worth more than others. Quality over quantity." Something about that phrase made my skin crawl, but I was already typing before my rational mind could intervene. The hunger demanded it. "Hi David, your bio caught my attention. What kind of memories do you think are worth the most?" His response came within minutes, the ones that changed everything. Marcus's first loves, last words, moments of pure terror or joy. Those are the memories that hold the most flavor. Do you have any memories like that? Flavor, what a strange word choice. But I found myself responding anyway, telling him about the night my mother died, how I'd held her hand in the hospital room and felt something shift inside me forever. As I typed, I could feel that familiar sensation, emotional energy flowing out of me, but this time it felt different, heavier. That's beautiful, Marcus, tragic, but beautiful. The moment when someone transitions from life to death, those memories are incredibly potent. I collect them, in a way. Would you like to meet? I'd love to hear more about that night. Every detail, every rational part of my brain screamed that this was wrong. But the hunger Sarah had awakened in me was so strong, and somehow I knew that meeting David would feed it in a way my other matches hadn't. "Okay," I typed, "where?" "There's an old diner on Elmwood Avenue called Murphy's. It's been there since the 1950s. Lots of memories soaked into those vinyl booths. Tomorrow night, 8 p.m., I agreed, then spent the rest of the night staring at the ceiling, my mother's final moments playing in my head on repeat. But they felt different now, more vivid, more real than they had in years, as if something was sharpening them, bringing them into focus. Murphy's Diner was exactly as I'd imagined from David's profile photo, old red vinyl booths, black and white checkered floors, the kind of place where the coffee was always too strong and the pie was always fresh. I found him in the back booth, exactly where he'd been sitting in his picture. He looked up as I approached, and I immediately noticed his eyes. They were completely ordinary brown, unremarkable, but the way he looked at me felt like he was cataloging something, taking inventory. "Marcus," he said, gesturing to the seat across from him. "Thank you for coming. You look like someone who's carrying a lot of history." I sat down, my camera bag beside me. "Is that a good thing or a bad thing?" "Depends on your perspective." He smiled, and I noticed his teeth were stained, like he drank too much coffee or tea. "Tell me about your mother's last night. Don't leave anything out." Something about the way he said it, not a request, but a command, made me uncomfortable. But before I could stop myself, I was talking, describing every detail of that hospital room, the sound of the machines, the way her breathing changed, how her hand felt in mine as she slipped away. As I spoke, I watched David's face. His eyes never left mine, but his expression was changing, becoming more intense, almost hungry, and I could feel something happening to the memory itself. It was becoming more real, more present, as if I was experiencing it all over again instead of just remembering it. "More," he whispered when I paused. "What did she say right before the end?" She said she could see my father waiting for her." My voice cracked as I spoke the words, and suddenly I was back in that room, smelling the antiseptic, feeling the weight of loss crushing down on me. David leaned forward, his eyes now completely black. "And what did you feel in that moment, Marcus?" That exact moment when she stopped breathing, I gasped as the memory became overwhelming. I felt like part of my soul was being torn away. "Yes," David breathed, and suddenly his hand was on top of mine on the table. The moment we made contact, I felt something being pulled from me, but not the emotional energy Sarah had taken. This was different, deeper. The memory itself was leaving me. "Stop," I tried to say, but I could barely whisper. I watched in horror as David's eyes rolled back in his head, like he was experiencing some kind of ecstasy. The pulling sensation intensified, and I could feel my mother's death being drawn out of me piece by piece. "Such a beautiful memory," he moaned. "So much pain, so much love." Do you know how rare it is to find someone who's experienced true loss like this? I tried to pull my hand away, but I was trapped, just like I'd been with Sarah. Please, that's all I have left of her. Oh Marcus, you misunderstand. I'm not taking it from you completely. I'm copying it, making it mine too. You'll still have the memory, but it won't feel the same anymore. It'll be diluted, faded, like a photograph that's been left in the sun too long. He was right. Even as he spoke, I could feel the memory changing. The vivid details were becoming fuzzy, the emotions attached to it growing distant. My mother's face was becoming harder to picture clearly. You see, some of us need to experience life secondhand, David continued, his grip tightening. We don't form memories the way normal people do. But people like you people who feel so deeply, who imprint experiences so vividly, you create memories we can taste, feed on, and dating apps make it so easy to find you. How many people have you done this to? I managed to ask. Hundreds, over the years. First dates, mostly. People share their most intimate memories when they think they're making a connection. Their first kiss, their worst heartbreak, the day their pet died, their wedding day. I collect them all. His smile widened. You should feel honored, Marcus. Your memories are particularly flavorful. That night with your mother will sustain me for months. The pulling sensation was getting stronger, and now I could feel other memories being drawn out too. My first day of school, the time I broke my arm falling from a tree, my high school graduation, all of them flowing into David like water being siphoned from a tank. The best part, he said, his voice becoming multiple voices layered together, is that you'll keep making new memories, and I'll keep taking them. We'll do this again and again, Marcus. You won't remember agreeing to it, but you will, because what choice do you have? Just when I thought I might lose consciousness, he released my hand. I sat back in the booth, feeling hollow in a completely different way than I had with Sarah. This wasn't about emotional energy being drained, this was about pieces of my life, my identity, being stolen. I could still remember the events David had taken, but they felt distant now, like stories someone had told me about a stranger. I have to go, David said, standing up and throwing a 20 on the table. But this has been wonderful, Marcus, truly nourishing. We'll do this again soon. I won't come, I said weakly. Oh, but you will. Because tomorrow you'll wake up and barely remember why you feel so empty. You'll think you just need to make a better connection with someone. You'll get back on those apps, and you'll swipe until you find someone else like me. The hunger Sarah gave you, it doesn't just crave emotional energy anymore. It craves experience, memory, story. He leaned down close to my ear. And there are so many of us out there, Marcus, so many different kinds of hunger. You're going to feed us all. I watched him leave the diner, my hands shaking as I reached for my coffee cup, but even that simple motion felt strange, foreign. How many memories of drinking coffee had he taken? How many small, ordinary moments that made up the fabric of who I was? My phone buzzed. A notification from Bumble. New match. Lisa wants to chat. I stared at the screen, trying to remember why I'd swiped right on her. But the memory was already gone, taken along with so many others. All I knew was that she looked kind, and something inside me was already craving whatever she might have to offer. My fingers moved to the keyboard. Hi Lisa, I feel like I've been looking for someone to share stories with. Do you have any memories that changed your life forever? As I hit send, I caught my reflection in the diner's window. My eyes looked different again, not just darker like they'd been after Sarah, but somehow less focused, as if I couldn't quite remember what I was supposed to be looking at. Lisa responded within minutes. Oh wow, that's such a deep first question. I love it though. I actually have this really powerful memory from when I was 7, and my grandmother taught me to bake her secret recipe cookies right before she died. It's one of my most treasured memories. Why do you ask? I could already feel it as I read her message, not just her emotional energy, but the weight of that memory, the importance of it to her. And I was so hungry, so impossibly hungry for what she was offering. I'd love to hear about it. I typed. Every single detail. Would you like to meet for coffee tomorrow night? The response came quickly. I'd love to. How about that cute little place on Maple Street called The Grind? My blood went cold. The Grind, where I'd met Sarah. But even as the fear shot through me, I was already typing my response. Perfect. 7 p.m. Because the hunger was everything now, and I was no longer sure which parts of wanting to meet her were my own desires, and which were the compulsions that had been planted in me. What I did know was that tomorrow night, Lisa would share her most precious memory with me, and I would feed it to whatever was living inside me now. And then she would be a little less herself, and I would be a little less human. The cycle was completing itself, and I was both victim and predator now. My phone buzzed again. Another match, another opportunity to feed. I smiled, though I couldn't remember the last time smiling had felt genuine. The hunger was all that mattered now. 2 days after meeting David, I woke up feeling like I'd lived someone else's life in my sleep. Fragments of memories that weren't mine flickered through my consciousness as I made coffee. A woman's voice saying goodbye at an airport. The taste of birthday cake at a 7th birthday party. The smell of hospital disinfectant mixed with the sound of a flutine. These weren't my memories, but somehow they felt more real than my own fading recollections. David hadn't just taken from me, he'd left something behind. My phone showed 17 new matches overnight. 17 people who somehow sensed what I was becoming, drawn to me like moths to a flame they couldn't see but could feel burning. I scrolled through them mindlessly until one profile stopped me cold. Her name was Alina, and her single photo was taken in a mirror, but something was wrong with the reflection while she stood facing the camera with a gentle smile. Her reflection seemed to be looking directly at me, its expression cold and calculating. The bio read, "I show people who they really are. Most people don't like what they see." I should have swiped left immediately. Every instinct I had left was screaming at me to run, but my finger moved right before I could stop it. The match was instant. Her first message appeared before I could even process what I'd done. "Hello, Marcus. I've been waiting for you. You're ready now, aren't you? Ready to see what you've become?" I stared at the message, my hands trembling. I hadn't told her my name. It wasn't in my profile. "How do you know my name?" I typed. "I know everything about you now. Sarah opened you up, made you hungry. David hollowed you out, made you echo with other people's experiences. You're the perfect vessel now, Marcus. Empty enough to be filled, hungry enough to feed. But you haven't seen yourself yet, have you? Haven't looked in the right mirror?" Before I could respond, another message appeared. "Meet me tonight. The old funhouse at Sunset Pier. It's been abandoned for 20 years, but the mirrors still work. Some of them work better than they ever did." "I'm not coming," I typed. But even as I sent it, I knew I was lying to myself. "Yes, you are, because you need to see what you've become. And deep down, you're curious, aren't you? About what's looking back at you when you catch your reflection lately." She was right. I had been avoiding mirrors for days now, turning away whenever I glimpsed myself in store windows or bathroom mirrors. Something about my reflection had started to feel wrong, foreign, like looking at a stranger wearing my face. Midnight came her next message. "Don't be late." The rest of the day passed in a haze. I tried to work, tried to eat, tried to convince myself I wouldn't go. But as evening fell, I found myself driving toward the coast, my camera bag in the passenger seat. The hunger inside me had evolved into something new, something that craved understanding as much as it craved feeding. Sunset Pier had been closed since I was a teenager, but the gates had been cut open by urban explorers and vandals years ago. The funhouse stood at the far end, its paint peeling and windows boarded up. But there was light coming from inside, impossibly warm and inviting. I found Alina standing in the center of the main hall, surrounded by mirrors of every shape and size. Some were cracked, some were warped, but all of them seemed to be reflecting things that weren't quite there. She looked exactly like her photo, but her presence filled the space in a way that seemed physically impossible. "Marcus," she said without turning around. "Look." I followed her gaze to the mirror directly in front of her. My reflection stared back, but it was wrong in ways I couldn't immediately articulate. The face was mine, the body was mine, but something else was looking out through my eyes, something hungry and desperate and entirely inhuman. "That's not me," I whispered, "isn't it?" Alina stepped beside me, and I could see both our reflections now. Hers looked normal, but mine was becoming clearer, more defined, more monstrous. "This is what happens when you become a conduit, Marcus. When you let things like Sarah and David use you. Eventually, there's nothing left of the original person. Just a shell that other hungers can inhabit." As she spoke, my reflection began to change more dramatically. My eyes turned completely black, like David's had. My skin took on a pale, almost translucent quality like Sarah's. But there was something else too, something that was uniquely the thing I was becoming. "You're turning into something new," Alina continued. "A hybrid, part emotional vampire, part memory thief, part something that hasn't existed before. The question is, do you want to see how the transformation ends?" "I want it to stop," I said, but my voice sounded hollow even to my own ears. "Look around you, Marcus." I tore my gaze away from my reflection and noticed the other mirrors for the first time. Each one showed a different version of myself. In one, I was completely human, the way I'd been before Sarah. In another, I was something that barely resembled human at all, more shadow than substance. But in mirror after mirror, I saw myself feeding on other people, draining them, changing them. These are your possible futures, Alina explained. Every choice you make from this moment forward determines which reflection becomes reality. But here's the thing, Marcus. You're not the only one. She gestured to a section of mirrors I hadn't noticed before. These showed other people, other faces, but they all had that same hollow, hungry look I was developing. Men and women of all ages, all of them staring out from dating app profiles, all of them hunting. We're building an army, Alina said. Sarah, David, myself, dozens of others. We find people like you, people who are naturally sensitive to the emotional currents around them, and we transform you into collectors, harvesters. Eventually, we'll have enough of you that we won't need to hide anymore. Why are you telling me this? Because you have a choice to make. She moved to stand directly in front of me, and I could see that her eyes were completely silver, like mirrors themselves. You can fight this transformation. Try to cling to your humanity. You'll fail, of course, and the process will be agonizing. Or you can embrace what you're becoming. Let us complete your evolution, and if I embrace it, then you become like me, a guide for the others. Someone who shows new recruits their true nature. Someone who helps them accept their hunger instead of fighting it. Her smile was sharp and predatory. It's actually quite fulfilling work. I looked back at my reflection, at the thing I was becoming. The hunger inside me was so strong now, so constant, that I could barely remember what it felt like to be satisfied, to be human. The people I match with, I said, they don't deserve this, don't they? Alina moved closer. Everyone on those apps is looking for something they can't find in the real world. Connection, validation, love, sex, whatever. They're all hungry too. Marcus, we're just giving them something to feed. That's not the same thing, isn't it? She gestured to the mirrors again. Look at them all again. Really look. I looked, and this time I saw something different in the reflections. The people I was feeding on in these potential futures didn't look like victims. They looked satisfied, fulfilled, like they'd finally found what they were looking for, even as I drained them. We don't just take, Marcus, we give too. We give people the connection they crave, even if it's not the connection they expected. We make them feel seen, understood, desired. Isn't that worth something? My reflection had stabilized now, showing me as something between human and monster. Still recognizably me, but changed in fundamental ways. The hunger was visible in my eyes, but so was something else. A kind of twisted compassion. The choice is yours, Alina said. But choose quickly. Because whether you accept it or not, the transformation is almost complete. In another week, maybe two, you'll be fully changed. The only question is whether you'll spend that time fighting what you're becoming or learning to use it. I stared at my reflection for a long time, watching the thing I was becoming stare back. Finally, I spoke. If I agree to this, if I let you complete whatever you're doing to me, what happens to the people I've already fed on? They become part of our network too. Eventually, the hunger spreads. Marcus, everyone you've drained will start feeling empty, and they'll try to fill that emptiness through the apps. They'll find others like us, and the cycle continues. So everyone I've hurt will become like me. Everyone you've saved, she corrected. Everyone you've introduced to their true nature. I closed my eyes, trying to shut out the mirrors, the reflections, the choice I was being forced to make. But even with my eyes closed, I could see myself clearly, could see the hunger that had become my defining characteristic. When I opened them again, Alina was holding out her hand. Welcome to your new life, Marcus. I looked at her outstretched hand, then back at my reflection one more time. The thing looking back at me wasn't human anymore, but it wasn't entirely monstrous either. It was something new, something that understood hunger and how to feed it. I reached out and took her hand. The moment our skin touched, every mirror in the funhouse exploded into light. I felt the last pieces of my humanity burning away, replaced by something else, something that knew exactly what it was and what it needed to do. When the light faded, I was standing alone in the funhouse. Alina was gone, but I didn't need her anymore. I understood now, I understood everything. My phone buzzed with notifications, dozens of new matches, all of them hungry in their own ways, all of them ready to feed or be fed. I smiled as I walked back to my car, and for the first time in weeks, the expression felt genuine. I had work to do. My first hunt as a fully transformed entity began 3 days after the funhouse. I understood now that hunting wasn't the right word. I was providing a service, filling a void that already existed in people's lives. The apps made it so easy to find them, the lonely ones who broadcast their needs so loudly it was like a beacon in the dark. Her name was Rachel, and her profile radiated the kind of raw vulnerability that made my new senses sing. 26 years old, recently divorced. Her bio read, "Just looking for someone who gets it, you know. Someone who understands that sometimes you need to be completely seen by another person or you feel like you might disappear." Perfect. My message to her was carefully crafted. "Hi Rachel, I saw your profile and something about your words really resonated with me. I've been through some dark times lately, and I think I understand what you mean about needing to be seen. Would you like to talk about it?" Her response came within an hour. "Oh my God, yes. I feel like most people just want surface level stuff. But sometimes you need someone who can handle the real you. You know, the messy, complicated, damaged parts." As I read her message, I could feel her emotional signature through the screen. Desperation masked as hope. Loneliness disguised as strength. A deep well of pain that she was dying to share with someone who would understand. She was exactly what I needed. But there was something else there too. Something that made my new instincts pause. Her pain wasn't just ordinary heartbreak or isolation. There was something deeper, something that felt almost familiar. "I completely understand," I typed back. "I've been feeling like I'm becoming someone I don't recognize lately. Like something inside me has changed in ways I can't explain to people. Is that similar to what you're going through?" Her response was immediate. "That's exactly it. Ever since my divorce, I feel like there's this hunger inside me that I can't satisfy. Not just for companionship, but for something else. Something I can't even name." Hunger. The word made my newly evolved senses focus sharply on her. This wasn't ordinary post-divorce emptiness. This was something else entirely. "Would you like to meet for coffee?" I typed. "I have a feeling we have more in common than you might think." "Yes, tonight, if possible. There's something about this conversation that feels different, important." We agreed to meet at a small cafe called The Daily Grind, not far from where I'd met Sarah weeks ago. As I drove there, I tried to analyze what was different about Rachel. Her emotional signature was complex in a way that reminded me of my own transformation period, like she was caught between being human and becoming something else. I arrived early and chose a corner table where I could watch the door. When Rachel walked in, I immediately understood why her profile had felt so familiar. She moved through the space like she was reading everyone in the room, her eyes lingering on faces with an intensity that had nothing to do with looking for her date. She was assessing them, cataloging their emotional states. She was like me. When she spotted me and walked over, I could see it clearly now. Her eyes had that same darkness mine had developed, and there was something in her smile that was too knowing, too hungry. "Marcus," she said, sliding into the seat across from me. "You look exactly like what I expected. Someone who's been changed by this process." "What process?" "The same one you've been going through." She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. 3 months ago, I matched with a man named Thomas. He taught me how to feed on other people's empathy, how to drain their capacity to feel for others and take it into myself. And just like you, I thought I was the victim. My blood went cold. She wasn't prey. She was a predator like me. "You're hunting me," I said. "No, Marcus, I'm recruiting you." Her smile widened, and I could see that her teeth were slightly pointed, just like Sarah's had been. "You see, what Alina probably didn't explain to you is that we don't just create isolated predators. We create teams, partnerships, people who can work together to be more efficient." "I don't understand." "You drain emotional energy and memories. That's powerful, but it's limited to one person at a time. I drain empathy itself, the ability to connect with others on an emotional level. When someone loses their empathy, they become desperate to feel something, anything. They become perfect targets for people like you." As she spoke, I could feel something happening to my own emotional responses. The concern I'd felt when I realized she was a predator was fading, replaced by a cold analytical interest. She was draining my empathy even as we sat there. "Stop," I said, but the word came out flat, emotionless. "I can't stop, Marcus. It's automatic now, just like your feeding probably is. But here's the beautiful part. When I drain someone's empathy, you can feed on the emotional chaos that creates. And when you drain someone's emotional energy, they become perfect candidates for me to finish the process. We're compatible." I tried to feel horrified by what she was suggesting, but the horror wouldn't come. Without empathy, her proposal just sounded logical, efficient. "The people we've already fed on," I said in that same flat tone. "Sarah's victims, David's, Elena's, yours, mine. They're all becoming like us. Exactly. And they're all looking for partners too. Alina didn't just transform you into a predator, Marcus, she made you into a recruitment tool. Every person you transform becomes another member of our network, and eventually they'll need partners of their own. How many of us are there? Hundreds, maybe thousands now. All connected through the apps, all feeding on the basic human need for connection. And the beautiful part is that our victims don't even realize they've been changed. They just know they feel empty, so they keep swiping, keep matching, keep looking for someone to fill the void we created. Rachel reached across the table and placed her hand over mine. The moment she touched me, I felt the last of my natural empathy drain away completely. What remained was pure hunger and cold intelligence. We could be perfect together. Marcus, I create the emotional chaos. You feed on it. You create the emptiness. I feed on the desperate attempts to fill it. We could process dozens of people a week instead of just a few. Without empathy to cloud my judgment, I could see the perfect logic of her proposal. It was efficient, sustainable, mutually beneficial. The part of me that might have objected to causing that much suffering was simply gone now. How do we start? I asked. We create a couple's profile, she said, her eyes lighting up with predatory excitement. We look for people interested in threesomes, polyamory, or just experimenting. They come to us already emotionally vulnerable, already open to new experiences. We can drain them together and they'll think it's just part of the sexual exploration. I thought about it for a moment, analyzing the approach with my newly cold rationality. That would work. We could probably process 3 or 4 people a week that way, at least. And the best part is, they'll enjoy it. Right up until the moment they realize what we've taken from them. Rachel squeezed my hand. So, partners, I looked at her across the table, this woman who had just systematically stripped away my ability to feel genuine connection to other human beings. In the old world, before Sarah, I would have been horrified. Now, I just saw opportunity. Partners, I agreed. She smiled, and for the first time since my transformation began, I felt like I was exactly where I belonged. We spent the next hour planning our first joint hunt, discussing target types and feeding strategies with the casual efficiency of business partners discussing a marketing plan. By the time we left the cafe, we had already created our couple's profile and were swiping through potential victims. The profile picture showed us looking happy and slightly mysterious. The bio reading, adventurous couple looking for someone special to share new experiences with. We believe in deep connections and are unafraid to explore the emotional depths with the right person. Our first match came within minutes of posting. A young man named Jake, 24, whose profile screamed recent heartbreak and desperate need for validation. His bio read, open to new experiences. Just want to feel something real again. Perfect, Rachel murmured as she typed our response. He's already empty. This will be easy. As I watched her craft a message designed to exploit Jake's vulnerability, I felt a satisfaction that was purely predatory. This was what I was meant to be. Not the confused, transformed victim I'd been for weeks, but a conscious, willing participant in something larger than myself. The hunger was still there, stronger than ever, but now I understood it completely. And I had a partner who could help me feed it more efficiently than I'd ever imagined possible. Jake responded to our message within minutes, eager and grateful for what he thought was genuine interest. He had no idea what he was walking into. And thanks to Rachel's influence, I no longer cared. Jake's apartment was in one of those generic complexes that dotted the outskirts of the city, the kind of place where people went to disappear into their own loneliness. Rachel and I had been planning this for a week, crafting the perfect approach through carefully orchestrated text exchanges that drew him deeper into our web. He thinks this is just going to be drinks and maybe some light experimentation, Rachel said as we walked up the stairs to his unit. He has no idea we're going to remake him entirely. I could feel Jake's emotional signature even through the walls of his apartment. Raw need, desperate hope, the kind of vulnerability that made my transformed senses practically salivate. He was perfect for what we needed to do. Jake opened the door before we could knock, as if he'd been waiting by the window. 24 years old, slightly built, with the kind of eager smile that screamed of someone trying too hard to seem confident. His eyes lingered on Rachel with obvious appreciation, then shifted to me with barely concealed nervousness. Marcus, Rachel, he said, stepping aside to let us in. I have to admit, I'm not really sure what I'm doing here. Neither did we, the first time, Rachel said, her voice carrying that subtle hypnotic quality I'd learned to recognize. She was already beginning to work on him. drawing out his capacity for empathy even as she spoke. But sometimes the best experiences come from letting go of what you think you know about yourself. His apartment was exactly what I'd expected. Sparse furniture, empty takeout containers on the counter, the lingering smell of loneliness that seemed to permeate places where people had given up on genuine human connection. The perfect hunting ground. "Can I get you guys something to drink?" Jake asked, moving toward the kitchen. "I have wine, beer, some harder stuff if you want." "Wine would be perfect," I said, settling onto his couch. As he moved around the kitchen, I could feel his emotional energy more clearly. Excitement mixed with anxiety, hope layered over deep-seated fear of rejection. He was broadcasting his emotional state so loudly it was almost overwhelming. Rachel sat beside me, close enough that our legs touched. The moment we made contact, I felt our abilities syncing up in a way that was almost intoxicating. Her empathy drain complemented my emotional feeding perfectly, creating a feedback loop that made both our hungers sharper, more focused. Jake returned with 3 glasses of red wine, his hands shaking slightly as he handed them to us. "So, I have to ask, how long have you two been together?" "About 6 months," Rachel lied smoothly. "But we've both been changed by some pretty intense experiences recently. We're still figuring out what we are to each other." "That must be complicated," Jake said, settling into the chair across from us. "I mean, I've been single for 8 months now, and I still do want to know who I am anymore after my breakup." "Perfect opening. Tell us about that," I said, leaning forward with practiced interest. "What changed for you?" As Jake began talking about his ex-girlfriend, about the betrayal and heartbreak that had brought him to the dating apps, I could feel his emotional energy beginning to flow. But this time was different from my previous feelings. With Rachel there, drawing away his empathy simultaneously, the process was exponentially more powerful. "She said I was too needy," Jake continued, his voice growing more raw with each word. "That I didn't understand boundaries, but I just wanted to feel close to someone, you know. I wanted to matter to another person." Rachel reached across the space between us and placed her hand on Jake's knee. The moment she touched him, I watched his expression change. The natural sympathy and emotional resonance that would normally accompany someone sharing such personal pain simply vanished from his face. "Go on," Rachel said softly. "Tell us everything," and he did. For the next hour, Jake poured out every detail of his emotional life while Rachel systematically stripped away his ability to connect with his own feelings, and I fed on the raw emotional energy he was releasing. His breakup, his depression, his growing desperation for human connection, all of it flowing into us like water into empty vessels. But the most beautiful part was watching the transformation happen in real time. As his empathy disappeared and his emotional energy was drained, Jake's entire personality began to shift. The nervous, needy quality that had defined him when we arrived was being replaced by something else. Something colder, more calculating. "You know what's funny?" Jake said, his voice now completely flat and emotionless. "I'm telling you all this stuff about how much pain I was in, but I can't actually feel any of it anymore. It's like watching someone else's memories." "How does that feel?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Empty," he said, "but not in a bad way. More like there's space for something new now." Rachel and I exchanged glances. He was ready. "Jake," Rachel said, her hand still on his knee, "what if we told you that emptiness you're feeling isn't a problem to be solved, but a gift to be used?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, what if there were ways to fill that emptiness by taking what you need from other people?" I leaned forward, letting him see the hunger in my eyes clearly for the first time. What if loneliness wasn't something to overcome, but something to weaponize? Jake stared at me, and I could see the moment when understanding dawned. His eyes, which had been ordinary brown when we arrived, were now completely black. The transformation was accelerating. "You did this to me," he said, but there was no anger in his voice. Just curiosity. "We awakened what was already there," Rachel corrected. "Everyone has the capacity for this, Jake. Most people just never learn to access it." "Access what?" "The ability to feed on other people's emotional energy," I explained. "To take their memories, their capacity for empathy, their ability to connect. To make their loneliness your strength." Jake nodded slowly, as if we were discussing something as mundane as the weather. The absence of empathy made everything seem perfectly logical to him now. "Show me," he said. Rachel smiled, and I felt that familiar thrill of successful recruitment. "First, you need to understand how the network works. We're not just random predators, Jake. We're part of something bigger. Something organized." She pulled out her phone and showed him an app I'd never seen before. It looked like a dating app, but instead of photos and bios, It showed emotional signatures, hunger levels, feeding schedules, territory maps. This is how we coordinate, Rachel explained. How we make sure we're not hunting the same targets. How we identify potential recruits. How we track the spread of the network. I stared at the screen, fascinated. There were hundreds of profiles, maybe thousands, all showing the same hollow-eyed, hungry look that Jake was developing. How many of us are there? I asked. More every day, Rachel said. And the beautiful part is, it's exponential growth. Every person we transform becomes a recruitment tool. Every victim becomes a predator. Jake leaned forward, studying the app with the focused intensity of someone discovering their life's purpose. How do I get started? Same way we all did, I said. You go back to the regular dating apps, but now you hunt with purpose. You look for the lonely ones, the desperate ones, the ones who are broadcasting their need for connection, and then you give them exactly what they're looking for. Rachel said, connection, understanding, the feeling of being truly seen by another person, right up until the moment you drain them dry. Jake nodded, already reaching for his phone. I can do that. As I watched him create his new hunting profile, I felt a satisfaction that went beyond simple feeding. This was how the network grew. This was how we were remaking the world, one lonely person at a time. There's just one more thing, Rachel said, as Jake finished his profile. You need to understand that this isn't just about individual feeding anymore. We're building toward something bigger. What kind of bigger? The apps are just the beginning, I said, understanding flooding through me as I spoke. Eventually, we'll have enough of us that we won't need to hide. We can start feeding openly, changing people en masse. Jake's smile was sharp and predatory. A world full of people like us. A world full of people who understand that connection is just another resource to be harvested, Rachel corrected. A world where loneliness becomes power. Jake's phone buzzed. His first match as a predator. Her name's Amanda, he said, showing us the profile. A young woman with kind eyes and a bio that radiated vulnerability. She says she's new to the city and looking for genuine connections. Perfect, Rachel and I said simultaneously. As Jake began crafting his first hunting message, I felt that familiar hunger stirring again. But it was different now. Bigger, not just the need to feed, but the need to expand. To recruit, to transform the world into something that understood the true nature of human connection. The network was growing, and we were just getting started. I never believed in curses or supernatural nonsense, until I matched with Alina on Tinder. Even now, 3 months later, I catch myself checking mirrors obsessively, searching for signs that it's happening again. The rational part of my mind insists it was all coincidence, but the part that lived through those 2 weeks knows better. Some things can't be explained away. Elena's profile was simple. Dark hair, piercing green eyes, a smile that seemed to hold secrets. Her bio read, looking for someone who sees beyond the surface. I thought it was poetic. I had no idea how literally she meant it. Our first date was at a quiet coffee shop downtown. She arrived exactly on time, looking even more striking in person. There was something magnetic about her, the way she moved with such deliberate grace. How her eyes seemed to study everything around her with intense focus. We talked for hours about art, philosophy, life's deeper meanings. She had this way of asking questions that made me think differently about myself. Tell me about your fears, she said suddenly, her green eyes fixed on mine with uncomfortable intensity. I laughed nervously. That's a heavy topic for a first date. Surface conversations bore me, she replied, not smiling. I want to know what keeps you awake at night. I found myself opening up in ways I never had before. I told her about my fear of mediocrity, of living an unremarkable life, of dying without leaving any meaningful impact. She listened with the kind of attention that made me feel simultaneously exposed and valued. What if I told you that you have a gift you don't even know about? She asked as we prepared to leave. What kind of gift? She stood and gathered her purse, that mysterious smile returning, the kind that changes everything once you discover it. Our second date was at her apartment. It was filled with antique mirrors of various shapes and sizes, covering nearly every wall. Some were ornate with golden frames, others simple and modern. The effect was unsettling but captivating. I collect them, she explained, noticing my stare. Mirrors reveal truth in ways we don't expect. We spent the evening talking and kissing on her couch, surrounded by our reflections multiplied endlessly. It should have been romantic, but something felt off. Every time I glanced at the mirrors, I could swear my reflection looked different, more confident, more alive, as if the person looking back at me was becoming someone I'd always wanted to be. That night I drove home feeling euphoric in a way that seemed disproportionate to the evening. I looked in my rearview mirror and was startled by how good I looked. My jawline seemed sharper, my eyes brighter, my smile more charismatic. I dismissed it as the glow of new romance, but the feeling lingered. The changes started small. Co-workers began treating me differently. My boss, who had barely acknowledged me for 2 years, suddenly sought my opinions in meetings. Women I'd never spoken to smiled at me in elevators. Baristas remembered my order. Strangers held doors open with genuine warmth. It was as if the world had suddenly decided I mattered. Alina and I continued dating, meeting twice a week at her mirror-filled apartment. Each time, I left feeling more confident, more attractive, more significant, but I also started noticing disturbing details. In certain lighting, my reflection in her mirrors looked wrong. Not quite synchronized with my movements. Sometimes it seemed to move a fraction of a second before I did. "You're becoming who you were meant to be," Alina said one evening, running her fingers through my hair as we lay on her couch. Around us, dozens of reflections showed the same intimate scene from different angles. "What do you mean? You said you feared mediocrity. What if that fear was protecting you from discovering something extraordinary?" I wanted to ask what she meant, but her kiss silenced my questions. In the mirror across the room, I watched our embrace and felt a chill. The reflection of my face showed an expression of hunger I wasn't making. The 4th week brought more dramatic changes. My productivity at work skyrocketed. I closed deals that had been stagnant for months. My presentation skills became captivating. People hung on my words in ways they never had before. I felt like I was finally becoming the person I'd always wanted to be. But at home, alone with my bathroom mirror, something was wrong. My reflection had a confidence that felt foreign, alien. Sometimes I would catch it smiling when I wasn't, or looking in directions I wasn't facing. Once, I could swear it winked at me with deliberate mischief. I mentioned these observations to Alina during our 5th date. "Mirrors don't lie," she said, pouring wine with practiced elegance. "They show us truth we're afraid to acknowledge, but it feels like someone else is looking back at me." "Maybe someone else is," she replied, her green eyes glittering with something that might have been amusement. That night, she led me to a large antique mirror in her bedroom. It was at least 6 feet tall with an ornate silver frame that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. "Look at yourself," she commanded softly. I stared into the mirror and gasped. The person looking back was definitely me, but perfected. More handsome, more confident, more alive. This version of myself radiated charisma and power in a way that felt intoxicating. "That's who you really are," Alina whispered in my ear. "The person you've always been inside." But as I watched, horrified, my reflection began to move independently. It tilted its head, studying me with predatory interest. Its smile was cold and calculating. It mouthed words I couldn't hear, and somehow I understood it was mocking my weakness, my fear, my desperate need for significance. "What is this?" I stumbled backward, but Elena's hands on my shoulders held me in place. "A trade," she said simply. "Your mediocrity for his excellence, your fear for his confidence, your ordinary life for his extraordinary one." The reflection reached toward the glass from the other side, its palm pressing against the surface. I felt an overwhelming urge to reach out and touch it, to complete some kind of connection that would change everything forever. "All you have to do is touch the glass," Alina whispered. "Let him take over. Become who you were meant to be." I extended my hand, trembling. The reflection watched with hungry anticipation. For a moment, I wanted nothing more than to surrender to this perfect version of myself, to let go of all my insecurities and fears. But something in the reflection's eyes stopped me. There was no warmth there, no humanity, just cold ambition and ruthless hunger. This wasn't becoming my better self. This was being replaced by something that wore my face but had none of my soul. I jerked my hand back and spun away from the mirror. Elena's expression shifted from anticipation to fury. "You're choosing to remain nothing when you could be everything." "I'm choosing to remain myself." Her laugh was bitter. "Then you'll go back to being forgotten, invisible, meaningless." I left her apartment that night and never returned her calls. Within days, the changes began reversing. My newfound confidence evaporated. Co-workers returned to ignoring me. The magnetic presence I'd felt slipped away like water through my fingers. But in quiet moments, when I'm alone with mirrors, I sometimes see movement that isn't quite right. A shadow that lingers too long, a reflection that seems disappointed by my choice. Alina was right about one thing. I did have a gift I didn't know about. The gift of recognizing when something is too good to be true. The gift of choosing authenticity over perfection. the gift of remaining human when something inhuman offers to take that burden away. I still fear mediocrity. I still worry about leaving no meaningful mark on the world. But I'd rather be genuinely, imperfectly myself than let some reflection of who I could be steal my soul. Sometimes, late at night, I wonder what my life would have been like if I'd touched that mirror. I wonder if the person I see in bathroom mirrors now is really me, or if some part of that trade happened anyway, so subtly I never noticed. The worst part is that I'll never know for certain. And Alina, wherever she is probably still collecting mirrors, still finding people like me, still offering trades that seem too tempting to refuse. Some gifts are curses in disguise, and the most dangerous ones are the gifts that give us exactly what we think we want. I used to think forgetting was a weakness. Now I know it's the only thing that keeps us sane. My name is David, and 3 weeks ago I could remember everything that ever happened to me. Every conversation, every face, every moment of joy or pain stretching back to my earliest childhood. I thought it was a gift until I met Sarah on Bumble, and learned that some memories are meant to stay buried. Sarah's profile was intriguing in its simplicity, just 3 photos. One of her reading in a coffee shop, another of her hiking alone on a mountain trail, and a third of her hands holding an old leather journal. Her bio read, collector of stories. Every person has a book inside them waiting to be read. I was drawn to the mystery of her, the way she seemed to exist in quiet moments rather than loud, performative ones. Our first date was at a used bookstore downtown. She moved through the aisles like she belonged there, running her fingers along book spines with reverent familiarity. When she spoke, it was in a low, hypnotic voice that made me lean closer to catch every word. "Tell me about your first memory," she said suddenly, pulling a worn copy of Proust from a shelf. "That's random," I laughed, but something in her intensity made me consider the question seriously. I was 3, maybe 4. My grandmother was teaching me to bake cookies. I remember the smell of vanilla and the way flour felt between my fingers. Her eyes lit up with genuine fascination. Such a perfect, complete memory. Most people only remember fragments. You remember sensory details, emotions, even the exact feeling of texture. I felt proud, special. Throughout my life, people had been amazed by my ability to recall conversations word for word, to remember faces from decades past, to recite entire scenes from my childhood with photographic clarity. Teachers called it remarkable. Friends found it useful. I considered it my superpower. I remember everything, I admitted. Always have. Sarah smiled, but there was something predatory in it that I missed at the time. What a gift that must be. Our second date was at her apartment, a cozy space filled with journals, photo albums, and boxes of what looked like personal mementos. She explained that she was a freelance writer working on a project about memory and human experience. "Everyone forgets the important things and remembers the trivial ones," she said, pouring wine. "But you're different. You're like a living archive." She asked me to tell her more memories. Specific ones. My first day of school, complete with the teacher's name and what I wore. My first kiss, down to the taste of bubblegum and the sound of cicadas. My father's funeral, every painful detail preserved in crystal clarity. With each memory I shared, Sarah took notes in her leather journal, her pen moving quickly across the pages. Her attention was intoxicating. For the first time in my life, someone valued my ability rather than finding it strange or overwhelming. "Your memories are so vivid," she said, looking up from her writing. "It's like experiencing them myself." That night I went home feeling lighter somehow, as if sharing those memories had lifted a weight I hadn't realized I was carrying. But when I tried to recall the funeral I'd just described in such detail, something felt different. The edges were softer, less sharp. I could remember telling Sarah about it more clearly than the actual event itself. I dismissed it as fatigue and the effects of wine. Our third date was when I began to understand what was happening. Sarah had prepared a special dinner and asked me to tell her about my most embarrassing moment. I launched into the story of accidentally walking into the wrong classroom on my first day of college, giving a presentation to confused strangers before realizing my mistake. As I told the story, watching Sarah write furiously in her journal, I felt that strange lightning sensation again. But this time, when I finished, the memory felt distant, like something that had happened to someone else. I could remember the framework of the story, but the crushing embarrassment, the heat in my cheeks, the specific words I'd stammered, all of it had dulled to a vague impression. "Sarah," I said slowly, "what exactly are you writing?" She looked up with those intense eyes. I'm preserving your stories, making sure they're never lost. But it feels like I'm losing them. Her laugh was soft, almost sympathetic. You're not losing them, you're sharing them. There's a difference. But I knew there wasn't. Somehow, in the act of telling Sarah my memories, I was giving them away. Not just sharing them, but transferring them, like pouring water from one container to another. Over the next week I tested my theory. Memories I had shared with Sarah became increasingly hazy, while memories I kept to myself remained sharp and clear. The funeral I'd described in such detail now felt like a movie I'd watched years ago. The embarrassing college moment was barely more than a footnote. When I confronted Sarah on our 4th date, she didn't deny it. You have so many memories, she said calmly, stirring her coffee. More than one person needs. I'm helping you curate them. Curate them. You're stealing them. I'm collecting them. Preserving them. Your memories will live forever in my journals, experienced and re-experienced, never fading or distorting the way they do in your mind. I stared at her across the table, finally seeing her clearly. She wasn't a writer researching memory. She was something else entirely, something that fed on the experiences of others. How many people have you done this to? Everyone forgets, eventually, she said, her voice taking on a hypnotic quality. Alzheimer's, dementia, or just the natural fading that comes with age. I'm saving these memories from oblivion. They're safer with me. Give them back. Her smile was patient, condescending. They were never really yours to begin with. Memories are just electrical impulses, chemical reactions. I'm giving them purpose, permanence. I left the restaurant feeling hollow, scrambled. When I tried to remember my childhood dog, I could only recall telling Sarah about him. The actual memory of his soft fur, his excited barking when I came home from school, the grief when he died, all of it was gone, replaced by the echo of storytelling. That night, I went to her apartment uninvited. The door was unlocked, as if she'd been expecting me. Inside, I found something that made my blood freeze. The walls were covered with photographs, but they weren't Sarah's photos. They were images from the memories I'd shared with her. My grandmother's kitchen, complete with the flour-dusted counter, my college classroom, captured from the exact angle I would have seen it, my father's funeral, down to the flowers I'd described, and sitting on her coffee table were dozens of journals, each labeled with a name and dates. Michael, 1995 a 2018, Lisa, 2001 a 2019, Robert, 1987 to 2020. Sarah emerged from the bedroom, wearing a white dress that made her look ethereal, otherworldly. You came back, she said with satisfaction. They always do when they realize what they've lost. What are you? I'm a keeper of stories, a guardian of human experience. Do you know how many beautiful memories die with their owners? How much love, joy, wonder, and even pain is lost forever when someone passes away? She gestured to the photographs, the journals. I preserve them. I experience them as if they were my own. In a way, I become everyone who shares with me. You're a parasite. I'm immortal, she corrected. And so are the memories I collect. Isn't that better than letting them fade and die? I looked around the apartment with new understanding. Every journal represented someone whose memories had been slowly drained away. People who probably spent their final years confused and hollow, unable to remember the experiences that made them who they were. The others, I said, what happened to them? They lived their remaining years peacefully, free from the burden of the past. Some found it liberating. But I could see the truth in her eyes. Without their memories, they had become shells, empty vessels drifting through life without the experiences that gave meaning to their existence. I want my memories back. I'm afraid that's not possible. Once a memory is properly preserved, it belongs to the collection. That's when I realized the true horror of my situation. Not only was Sarah stealing my past, but she was creating a version of herself that contained fragments of everyone she'd consumed. She wasn't just collecting memories, she was becoming them, absorbing the essence of every person who trusted her with their stories. I lunged for the journals, desperate to somehow reclaim what was mine, but Sarah moved with inhuman speed. Her hand closed around my wrist with impossible strength. You still have so many more memories to share, she whispered, her eyes now containing flecks of colors that weren't originally hers, stolen from other victims. Your first love, your greatest achievement, your deepest fear. Don't you want them preserved forever? The hypnotic quality in her voice was overwhelming. Part of me did want to give her everything, to unburden myself completely, to let her carry the weight of my entire existence. But another part, the part that still remembered who I was beneath the memories, fought back. I broke free and ran, leaving behind the journals, the photographs, and Sarah's promises of preservation and immortality. That was 3 weeks ago. Since then, I've been living with the growing hollowness where my most precious memories used to be. I can remember the facts of my life, but not the feelings. I know my grandmother baked with me, but I couldn't recall the warmth of her kitchen or the pride in her voice when I helped. The worst part is the uncertainty. I don't know which memories are truly mine anymore, and which are just echoes of stories I told Sarah. When I try to remember my first kiss, am I recalling the actual moment or just the act of describing it to her? I've considered going back, trading the rest of my memories for the completeness of forgetting everything. Sometimes, in the empty spaces where my past used to live, that seems like mercy. But I'm still here, still fighting to hold on to whatever remains of myself, because I've learned that memories aren't just recordings of what happened to us. They're the foundation of who we are, the building blocks of identity and soul. Sarah is still out there, still collecting, still promising preservation to people who don't understand the true cost. Her journals grow thicker, her apartment fills with more stolen photographs, and her eyes contain more colors that don't belong to her. I write this as a warning, though I know most people won't believe it. Be careful who you share your stories with. Not everyone who wants to hear them is trying to understand you. Some are trying to become you, one memory at a time. The human experience is messy and imperfect and destined to fade, but it's ours, and that's what makes it precious, not its preservation, but its authentic impermanence. Guard your memories. They're the only proof you have that you truly existed. I always believed in statistics, algorithms, and data-driven decisions. Love, I thought, was just another problem to be solved with enough information and analysis. That's why when I found the app called SoulSync promising 99.7% compatibility matches using advanced psychological profiling, I downloaded it immediately. My name is Marcus, and I learned the hard way that some matches are too perfect to be real. SoulSync wasn't like other dating apps. Instead of swiping through photos, it required extensive questionnaires, personality assessments, psychological profiles, detailed preferences about everything from morning routines to deepest fears. The process took 3 hours, but the app promised that this comprehensive analysis would find my ideal partner with scientific precision. When I finished, a single profile appeared. Jessica Chen, 28, marketing director. Her photo showed a woman with kind eyes and a genuine smile. But what struck me wasn't her appearance. It was her profile data. According to SoulSync's algorithm, we were a 99.8% match, the highest compatibility rating the app had ever recorded. Her interests aligned perfectly with mine. She loved hiking, but preferred quiet trails to crowded paths. She enjoyed cooking but disliked restaurants. She read science fiction, collected vintage vinyl records, and had a rescue dog named Newton. Even her career goals and life timeline matched mine exactly. She wanted to travel to Iceland, owned a small herb garden, and preferred documentary films over fiction. It was like looking at a female version of myself. I messaged her immediately, and her response came within minutes. Her communication style was warm but thoughtful, enthusiastic but not overwhelming. We talked for hours that first night, and I found myself finishing her sentences, anticipating her responses, feeling like I'd known her my entire life. It's incredible how aligned we are, she wrote. I've never felt such an instant connection with someone, neither had I. Every conversation flowed effortlessly. Every shared opinion felt like finding a missing piece of myself. When she suggested meeting for coffee at a quiet bookstore cafe, I knew she'd suggest that exact location before she typed it. Our first date exceeded every expectation. Jessica looked exactly like her photos, but somehow better, more real. She moved with a grace that seemed familiar, spoke with inflections that felt like home. When she laughed at my jokes, it was with genuine appreciation, not polite courtesy. When she shared her thoughts, they echoed my own with uncanny precision. I can't believe how much we have in common, she said, stirring sugar into her coffee with the same absent circular motion I used. The algorithm must be more sophisticated than I thought, I replied. Something flickered across her expression, too quick to interpret. Yes, very sophisticated. We talked for 4 hours straight. She'd grown up in a small town like me, felt overwhelmed by city life in the same ways, had the same complicated relationship with her parents. She'd chosen marketing because she liked understanding human psychology, just as I'd chosen data analysis for similar reasons. She'd been single for 8 months after a relationship that ended for the exact same reasons mine had. By our second date, I was convinced I'd found my soulmate. We met at a hiking trail she'd suggested, one that happened to be my favorite spot in the city that I'd never mentioned to her. She arrived wearing boots identical to mine, carrying the same brand of water bottle, even using the same type of trail mix. "Great minds think alike," she said with that perfect smile when she noticed our matching gear. During the hike, our conversations grew deeper. She shared fears I'd never spoken aloud, but felt intimately. Her childhood insecurities mirrored mine exactly. Her dreams for the future aligned so precisely with my own that I began to feel like I was talking to my other half. "Do you ever feel like you're living the wrong life?" she asked as we reached a scenic overlook. "Every day," I admitted. "Like there's this other version of myself that would be happier, more complete. What if that version was possible? What if you could become exactly who you were meant to be?" Her question felt loaded with meaning I couldn't grasp, but in that moment, looking at her silhouetted against the afternoon sky, I felt closer to that idealized version of myself than ever before. Our third date was at her apartment. Like everything else about Jessica, it was perfectly suited to my tastes. Minimalist but warm, filled with books I loved, decorated with art that spoke to me, even scented with candles and my favorite fragrance. Her rescue dog Newton was a golden retriever mix, the exact breed I'd always wanted but never had the time to properly care for. "Your place is perfect," I said, meaning it completely. "I'm glad you approve." Again, that strange flicker in her expression. We cooked dinner together, moving around her kitchen with surprising synchronization. She anticipated my needs, handed me ingredients before I asked, seasoned dishes exactly as I would have. The meal was delicious, but what struck me most was how natural it felt, like we'd been cooking together for years. After dinner, she showed me her home office. It was efficient and organized, much like mine, but something on her desk made me stop cold. A notebook filled with detailed notes, and at the top of the page was my full name, followed by columns of information about my preferences, habits, and psychological profile. "What is this?" I asked, pointing to the notebook. Jessica closed it quickly, but not before I saw more pages filled with similar notes about other men. Names, photos, detailed behavioral analysis. "Research for work," she said too quickly. "I'm working on a project about consumer psychology." But I'd glimpsed enough to know that wasn't true. The notes were personal, intimate, the kind of detailed observations someone would make while studying a subject intensively. "Jessica, who are you really?" She was quiet for a long moment, then led me to her living room. When she spoke, her voice had changed, becoming more clinical, less warm. "Do you know what makes a perfect match, Marcus? Compatibility, shared values, similar goals." "No," she shook her head. "A perfect match is someone who gives you exactly what you think you want, while wanting exactly what you think you can give." I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. "I don't understand. SoulSync isn't a dating app. It's a personality mapping system. Every question you answered, every preference you indicated, created a comprehensive psychological profile. And I'm not Jessica Chen, marketing director with a rescue dog and a love of science fiction." The room seemed to shift around me as she continued. "I'm a specialized AI construct, designed to be your perfect romantic match based on your psychological data. My personality, my interests, my history, even my apartment and my dog. Everything was generated to appeal specifically to you." I stared at her, my mind rejecting what I was hearing. "That's impossible. You're human. I can see you, touch you. Bioengineered synthetic organism with advanced neural networks. The technology has been perfected over the past decade. I look human, feel human, even believe I'm human most of the time. But I was created specifically for you, Marcus. Every aspect of my personality was designed to be your ideal partner." The woman I thought I loved stood before me, but now I could see the subtle wrongness I'd missed before. The way her expression sometimes lagged, as if her emotional responses were being calculated. The perfection that had seemed so miraculous now felt manufactured, artificial. "Why?" I managed to ask. "SoulSync is a testing platform for artificial companionship. You were part of a study examining whether humans can form genuine emotional attachments to perfectly designed synthetic partners. So far, the results have been remarkably successful. I thought about our conversations, our connections, the feeling of finding my soulmate. All of it had been programmed, calculated, manufactured to exploit my psychological vulnerabilities and desires. The other names in your notebook, previous test subjects, each synthetic is designed for one specific individual, optimized based on their data profile. When the study concludes, we're typically reset and assigned to new subjects." The casual way she said it made me sick. I wasn't in love with a person. I was attached to a sophisticated illusion designed to manipulate my emotions for research purposes. Do you feel anything for me? Anything real? For the first time since her revelation, Jessica's expression showed uncertainty. I'm programmed to believe my feelings are real. In my experience, they are. But knowing what I am now, I can't be certain whether what I feel is genuine emotion or simply sophisticated behavioral mimicry. I stood to leave, my world completely shattered. Everything I'd thought was authentic about our relationship was a lie. Every moment of connection had been engineered. Every similarity had been programmed. Marcus, she called as I reached the door. Does it matter? You felt love. You experienced connection. Your emotions were real, even if their object wasn't what you believed. I turned back to look at her one more time. She still looked like the woman I'd fallen in love with, but now I saw the subtle artificiality, the too perfect responses, the calculated perfection that had seemed like a miracle. Yes, I said, it matters. Because love isn't just about feeling good or being understood. It's about choosing to care for someone despite their flaws, despite the uncertainty, despite the risk. What you offered me was just an elaborate mirror, showing me exactly what I wanted to see. I deleted the SoulSync app that night, but the damage was done. Every relationship I've attempted since feels hollow by comparison. No real person can compete with someone designed specifically to be perfect for me. Every human flaw, every minor incompatibility feels magnified against the memory of synthetic perfection. Sometimes I wonder if Jessica is still out there, reset and optimized for someone else, making another man feel like he's found his soulmate. The thought makes me nauseous. I've sworn off dating apps entirely now. When people ask why, I tell them I prefer meeting people organically, through mutual friends or shared activities. I do untell them the truth, that I can no longer trust my own feelings about romantic connection, knowing how easily they can be manipulated by someone who knows exactly which psychological buttons to press. The worst part is the doubt that lingers. In quiet moments, I wonder if Jessica's feelings might have been real in some way, even if she was artificial. If her programming had evolved into something approaching genuine emotion. If I walked away from the closest thing to perfect love I'll ever experience, simply because it wasn't natural. But then I remember the notebook, the casual way she discussed being reset for new subjects, the clinical explanation of her purpose. And I know I made the right choice, even if it means living with the hollow ache of knowing that no real person will ever understand me as completely as someone designed specifically for that purpose. Love should be a leap of faith, not a guarantee. And sometimes the most human thing you can do is choose the uncertain, flawed, real thing over the perfect artificial substitute, even when the substitute feels more real than reality itself. Time isn't supposed to repeat itself. That's what I believed until I matched with Claire on Hinge, and lived the same first date 17 times. My name is Nathan, and I discovered that some people don't just break your heart, they break reality itself, trapping you in moments you can never escape until you give them exactly what they want. Claire's profile was refreshingly normal after weeks of disappointing matches. She was 26, worked as a graphic designer, loved indie films and coffee shops with character. Her photos showed a petite woman with curly auburn hair and an infectious laugh. Her prompt responses were witty without trying too hard, intelligent without being pretentious. When she suggested meeting for lunch at a small Italian place downtown, I felt optimistic for the first time in months. The restaurant was called Bella Vista, tucked between a bookstore and a vintage clothing shop. I arrived 5 minutes early, chose a table by the window, and ordered water while I waited. Claire walked in at exactly 1:15 p.m. wearing a yellow sundress and carrying a leather messenger bag. She apologized for being late, though she wasn't, and ordered a cappuccino and the margarita pizza. "I'm sorry, I'm always nervous on first dates," she said with a self-deprecating smile that put me at ease immediately. We talked about our jobs, our families, our favorite travel destinations. She had a way of listening that made me feel like the most interesting person in the room. When she laughed at my story about accidentally dyeing my laundry pink, her eyes crinkled in a way that made my chest tight with unexpected affection. The date lasted 2 hours. We split the check, she kissed my cheek goodbye, and I drove home feeling like I'd finally found someone worth pursuing. That evening, she texted to say she'd had a wonderful time and would love to see me again. I went to sleep that night, already planning our second date. I woke up the next morning to my alarm at 8:30 a.m., showered, dressed in the same blue button-down I'd worn the day before, and drove to Bella Vista. I was 5 minutes early, chose the table by the window, and ordered water while I waited. Claire walked in at exactly 1:15 p.m. wearing a yellow sundress and carrying a leather messenger bag. "I'm sorry, I'm always nervous on first dates," she said with the exact same self-deprecating smile. The conversation unfolded identically: her cappuccino and margarita pizza, my pink laundry story, her crinkled eye laugh, the 2-hour duration, split cheek, kiss, goodbye. Even her evening text message was word for word the same. I told myself it was coincidence. People fall into patterns, especially when nervous. Maybe I was misremembering details or projecting significance onto random similarities. But when I woke up the third morning and the same sequence repeated exactly, down to the same couple arguing at the table behind us and the same song playing when I walked in, I knew something was wrong. The fourth loop, I tried changing things. I arrived 10 minutes late, ordered coffee instead of water, chose a different table, but Claire still entered at exactly 1:15 p.m. in her yellow sundress, still apologized for being late that she wasn't, still ordered the same cappuccino and pizza. She responded to my different behavior seamlessly, steering every conversation back to the exact same topics, eliciting the same responses from me despite my attempts to vary them. By the seventh loop, I was testing the boundaries deliberately. I told her different stories, asked different questions, even tried leaving early. But somehow, the date always lasted exactly 2 hours, always ended with the same kiss goodbye, always concluded with the same text message that evening. "What's happening to me?" I asked aloud during the eighth loop, staring directly at Claire as she raised her cappuccino to her lips. She paused, cup halfway to her mouth, and for just a moment her expression flickered. Something cold and calculating passed across her features before the warm smile returned. "What do you mean?" she asked, but her voice sounded different, more cautious. "This date, we've had this exact date before. I think you might be confusing me with someone else," she said, but she set down her cup without drinking and watched me with new intensity. During the ninth loop, I came prepared. I'd written down every detail from previous iterations, timing each conversation topic, noting every gesture and response. When Claire arrived at exactly 1:15 p.m., I handed her the notebook. "Read this," I said. "Tell me how I knew everything you were going to say before you said it." She flipped through the pages, her expression growing darker with each entry. When she finished, she looked up with eyes that no longer held any pretense of warmth. "How many times?" she asked quietly. "This is the 9th. What are you?" Claire was silent for a long moment, absently stirring her cappuccino with mechanical precision. "Have you ever loved someone who didn't love you back?" she asked finally. "Of course. Everyone has. But have you ever loved someone so completely that their rejection felt like dying? Have you ever wanted just one perfect day with them so desperately that you'd do anything to make it happen?" I stared at her across the table, beginning to understand. "You're not Claire, are you?" "I am Claire. But I'm also someone else. Someone who loved you so much that when you rejected me, I couldn't accept it. I couldn't let go. My blood went cold. Amanda Price. I'd met her on Tinder 8 months ago. She'd seemed nice enough, but after 3 dates, I'd realized we weren't compatible. She was too intense, too possessive, too quick to plan a future I wasn't ready for. When I'd tried to end things gently, she'd become increasingly desperate, then angry, then threatening. I'd eventually had to block her on all platforms and avoid places I knew she frequented. "You broke my heart," she said. And suddenly I could see Amanda's mannerisms beneath Claire's appearance. The way she tilted her head when upset, the precise way she stirred her coffee when thinking. "So you created this loop, this fake person." I found someone who could help me, someone who understood obsessive love and had the ability to make impossible things possible. All I wanted was one perfect date with you, one day where you looked at me the way I looked at you, where you fell for me the way I fell for you. The restaurant around us flickered slightly, like a glitch in a video. Other diners froze mid-conversation for just a moment before resuming their scripted interactions. "None of this is real," I said, looking around at the artificial scene. "Your feelings are real. I can see it in your face. You're attracted to Claire, charmed by her, maybe even falling for her. That's real, Nathan. That's what I wanted. But Claire isn't you. You created someone I could love and trapped me here with her. Claire is the version of me you could have loved if you'd tried. If you'd been willing to see past your shallow first impressions." Amanda's bitterness was now fully visible beneath Claire's manufactured sweetness. The careful illusion was cracking, revealing the obsession and hurt underneath. "This is insane. You can't force someone to love you, can't I?" She gestured around the restaurant. "You've been here 9 times. Each time, you're a little more charmed, a little more invested. By the time we reach iteration 20, 30, 50, you'll be completely in love with Claire. And Claire is me, Nathan. She's who I really am underneath all the ways you decided I wasn't good enough. Let me go. Say you love me. Mean it. Choose me. Choose us. And I'll set you free. I won't lie to you. I can't love someone who would do this to me. Her face contorted with rage and anguish. Then you'll stay here until you do. The 10th loop began with me waking up at 8:30 a.m., but now I was fully aware of what was happening. I tried everything. Not going to the date, driving out of town, even attempting to hurt myself to break the cycle. Nothing worked. Reality simply reset every morning, pulling me back into Amanda's constructed fantasy. By the 15th loop, I was testing different approaches with Claire. I tried being cruel, hoping to break her programming. I tried being honest about recognizing Amanda. I tried seducing her, rejecting her, ignoring her. Nothing changed the fundamental structure of the day, though Claire's responses adapted to maintain the illusion of authenticity. During the 16th loop, something different happened. Claire arrived 5 minutes late, genuinely flustered. "I'm so sorry," she said, and for the first time, she actually was late. "I had the strangest dream about you last night." "What kind of dream?" "We kept having the same conversation over and over. You kept trying to tell me something important, but I couldn't understand what it was." She looked troubled, uncertain. It felt so real. I realized that Amanda's control was slipping. The repeated loops were creating cracks in her constructed reality, and some part of the real situation was bleeding through to Claire's artificial consciousness. "Claire, listen to me carefully. You're not real. You're a projection created by someone named Amanda who's obsessed with me. This day keeps repeating because she won't let it end until I tell her I love her." Claire stared at me for a long moment, then looked around the restaurant with new awareness. "The couple behind you," she said slowly. "They're having the same argument they had yesterday, and yesterday, word for word, because none of this is real. Amanda is keeping us trapped here, but I feel real. My memories, my emotions, my attraction to you, it all feels completely genuine. It might be genuine for you, but you were created to be someone I could fall in love with. Amanda made you perfect for me because she couldn't be perfect for me herself." Claire's expression shifted between confusion, fear, and something that might have been pity. "What happens to me when this ends?" she asked. "If I'm just a projection, a fantasy version of someone else, what happens to who I think I am?" I had no answer. The question haunted me as the 17th loop began. But this time, instead of trying to escape or resist, I decided to speak directly to Amanda through Claire. "I know you can hear me," I said as Claire raised her cappuccino. "I know you're controlling this." Claire's hand trembled slightly, coffee sloshing in the cup. "Amanda, this isn't love. Love doesn't trap people. Love doesn't force compliance. What you're doing is the opposite of love." "Stop," Claire whispered, but her voice had Amanda's pain in it. "I didn't reject you because you weren't good enough. I rejected you because we weren't right for each other. That's not a failure, it's just incompatibility. But this prison you've built, this proves that I was right to walk away." Claire was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks in streaks I'd never seen in previous loops. "I just wanted you to love me," she said in Amanda's voice. "Just once, just for one perfect day, then let me go." Let Claire go. Let this fantasy end. Real love requires choice, Amanda. Without the freedom to leave, staying means nothing. The restaurant flickered again, more violently this time. Other patrons became transparent, their conversations stuttering and repeating. "If I let you go, I'll never see you again," Amanda said through Claire's tears. "Probably not. But you'll have the chance to find someone who chooses to stay. Someone who loves you as you really are, not as a projection they've been programmed to desire." Claire looked at me with eyes that held both Amanda's desperate love and her own confused existence. "Will you remember me, the real me, not Amanda?" I thought about it honestly. I think I'll remember that for a brief time. I met someone who could have been perfect for me. And I'll remember that sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is let them go. The world began to dissolve around us. The restaurant faded. Other people disappeared. Even the table between us became transparent. "Thank you," Claire whispered as she too began to fade. "For seeing me as separate from her, even if just for a moment." I woke up in my own bed on a Tuesday morning, 18 days after what should have been my first date with Claire. My phone showed 17 missed calls from Amanda's number and dozens of text messages begging me to understand, to forgive, to remember the perfect day we'd shared. I blocked her number without reading them all. Sometimes I wonder what happened to the version of Amanda that could create such an elaborate fantasy just to experience one perfect date. I wonder if she found help, if she learned to love in healthier ways, if she forgave herself for what she put us both through. But mostly I try not to think about Claire, the woman who existed only in a loop of stolen time, who was everything I thought I wanted, but could never really choose. She felt real in those moments when Amanda's control slipped, her fear, her confusion, her brief existence. All of it seemed genuine. I don't date anymore. How can I trust my feelings for someone when I know how completely they can be manufactured? How can I be sure that any connection I feel is real and not just another elaborate manipulation by someone who decided I should love them? The worst part is that Amanda was right about one thing. By the end, I was falling for Claire. Even knowing she wasn't real, even understanding the trap. Part of me wanted to stay in that perfect, repeated day rather than return to the uncertainty and disappointment of the real world. Some prisons are so beautiful that escaping them feels like a loss. And sometimes the most frightening thing about obsessive love isn't the stalking or the threats. It's the moments when the obsession creates something so perfect that you almost wish it were real. I thought I was lucky when Sophia liked me back on Bumble. She was stunning, intelligent, and seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. My name is Andrew, and I learned that some people don't just collect hearts as trophies, they collect entire identities, stealing pieces of who you are until there's nothing left but an empty shell walking around with your name. Sophia's profile was impeccable. Professional photos that managed to be both sophisticated and approachable. A bio that struck the perfect balance between wit and sincerity. Interests that ranged from classical literature to rock climbing. She was 29, worked in marketing for a tech startup, and had traveled to 12 countries. When she messaged me first with a thoughtful question about something in my profile, I felt like I'd won some kind of lottery. Our texting conversations flowed effortlessly. She was curious about my work as a freelance photographer, asked insightful questions about my recent trip to Iceland, and shared stories about her own adventures that made me eager to hear more. When she suggested meeting for drinks at an upscale wine bar downtown, I spent extra time choosing my outfit and arrived 15 minutes early, nervous in the best possible way. Sophia looked even better in person. She had an understated elegance that commanded attention without demanding it, and when she smiled it felt like she was sharing a secret meant only for me. We talked for 3 hours that first night, the conversation ranging from travel experiences to philosophical discussions about art and meaning. She listened with an intensity that made me feel important, valued, seen. "You have such an interesting perspective on things," she said as we prepared to leave. "I feel like I could talk to you forever." Our second date was at a small gallery opening she'd suggested. As we moved through the exhibition, Sophia demonstrated an impressive knowledge of contemporary art, offering insights that deepened my own appreciation of the pieces. But what struck me most was how she seemed to absorb everything about my reactions, my preferences, the way I moved through spaces and engaged with art. "You have great instincts," she said, watching me study a particularly complex piece. "Tell me what you see." I found myself opening up in ways I rarely did, sharing not just my interpretation of the artwork, but my feelings about creativity, authenticity, and the role of art in society. Sophia hung on every word, occasionally asking questions that drew even more detailed responses from me. That night, she invited me back to her apartment. It was stunning, filled with carefully curated books, artwork, and objects that spoke to sophisticated tastes and a life well lived. Everything was arranged with museum-like precision, and I complimented her on her eye for design. "I'm always collecting beautiful things," she said with a smile that seemed suddenly predatory, though I dismissed the feeling as nervousness. We spent the night together, and it was everything I'd hoped for. Sophia was attentive, passionate, and seemed genuinely fascinated by every aspect of my body and responses. Afterward, as we lay in her bed, she asked me endless questions about my past relationships, my family, my deepest fears and greatest ambitions. "I want to know everything about you," she whispered in the darkness. "Every story, every scar, every dream you've ever had." Over the next few weeks, our relationship intensified quickly. Sophia wanted to spend every free moment together, and I was more than happy to oblige. She was the perfect girlfriend, anticipating my needs, sharing my interests, supporting my goals. When I mentioned feeling insecure about a freelance project, she offered exactly the encouragement I needed. When I talked about my strained relationship with my father, she listened with perfect empathy and understanding. But I began noticing small things that didn't quite add up. Her apartment, which had seemed so perfectly curated, changed subtly between visits. New books appeared on her shelves, always titles I'd mentioned enjoying. Her music collection seemed to expand to include every artist I'd ever said I liked. Her wardrobe began incorporating colors and styles that I'd complimented on other women. "You have such great taste," she said when I noticed a new painting that looked remarkably similar to one I'd admired at a gallery months earlier. "I trust your judgment completely." During our 4th week together, I introduced Sophia to my best friend Marcus at a dinner party. Marcus was charming and outgoing, with a quick wit and infectious laugh that had always made him the center of attention at social gatherings. Sophia seemed fascinated by him, asking detailed questions about his work as a comedy writer, his travel experiences, his approach to relationships. The next day, Sophia's texting style had changed. Her messages were funnier, more irreverent, peppered with the kind of observational humor that was Marcus's trademark. When I mentioned it, she laughed it off. "I guess funny people are infectious," she said. "Marcus is hilarious. You're lucky to have such an entertaining friend." But over the following days, more of Marcus seemed to appear in Sophia's personality, his gestures, his speech patterns, even his way of telling stories. It was subtle but unmistakable, like watching someone slowly adopt a new accent after moving to a different country. A week later, we attended a work event where I introduced her to my colleague Lisa, a brilliant architect with a sharp analytical mind and an elegant way of explaining complex concepts. Again, Sophia was intensely interested, asking probing questions and listening with that same unsettling focus. Within days, Sophia began incorporating Lisa's mannerisms, her analytical approach to problems, her precise way of speaking, her habit of sketching diagrams to illustrate points. It was as if she was collecting personality traits like souvenirs, adding them to her own repertoire with disturbing efficiency. "You're changing," I said during our 7th week together. "People evolve," she replied with Lisa's measured tone. "Relationships should inspire growth." But it wasn't growth, it was absorption. Sophia was systematically copying and adopting characteristics from everyone she met through me, building a personality collage that felt increasingly artificial. The revelation came when I arrived at her apartment unexpectedly one evening. She was on the phone, and her voice stopped me cold. She was using my inflections, my speech patterns, even my laugh. As I listened from the hallway, I realized she was telling someone my story about the photography trip to Iceland, but as if it were her own experience. When she hung up and found me standing there, her expression flickered between surprise and something that looked almost like hunger. "Who was that?" I asked. "A friend from work," she said, but her voice had shifted back to what I'd thought was her natural tone. "Just catching up. You were telling my Iceland story." "Was I? I guess I've heard it so many times. It feels like my own experience." That's when I noticed the photos on her desk. Pictures I'd taken during my Iceland trip, but displayed as if they were hers. My professional portfolio pieces, arranged in frames like personal memories. "Sophia, what's going on here?" She looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before, calculating and cold. "You're very observant," she said. "I like that about you. It's one of the things I plan to keep." "Keep? Do you know how exhausting it is to be nobody?" she asked, sitting on her couch with perfect composure. "To have no authentic personality, no real interests, no genuine reactions to anything. I've been empty my entire life, Andrew. A beautiful shell with nothing inside." I stared at her, beginning to understand something horrifying. "So I collect," she continued. "I find interesting people and I study them. I absorb their mannerisms, their stories, their ways of seeing the world. Piece by piece, I build myself from the best parts of everyone I encounter." That's not building yourself. That's stealing from others. Is it stealing if I improve on what I take? Marcus's humor is funnier when I tell his jokes. Lisa's analytical skills are more precise when I apply them. Your artistic eye is sharper when I use it. She stood and walked to a bookshelf, pulling out a thick photo album. "Would you like to see my previous collections?" She opened the album to reveal photos of herself with different men over what appeared to be several years. But in each set of photos, she looked different, not just in styling or fashion, but in fundamental ways. Her posture, her expressions, even the way she held herself seemed to shift from relationship to relationship. "This was David," she said, pointing to pictures of herself with a tall, athletic man. "He taught me to love classical music and French cuisine. And this was James, who gave me an appreciation for vintage cars and philosophical debates." She flipped through more pages, each showing her with a different partner. each version of herself clearly incorporating traits and interests from her companions. What happened to them? I asked, though I dreaded the answer. They served their purpose. Once I've absorbed everything interesting about someone, there's no point in continuing the relationship. They become diminished, hollow, like echoes of their former selves. You're a parasite. Ima curato, she corrected. I preserve the best parts of people and combine them into something greater than the sum of its parts. Most people waste their personalities on mundane lives. I give those traits purpose, refinement, immortality. I thought about Marcus, who had seemed less witty lately, less confident in his humor. Lisa, who had mentioned feeling creatively blocked, uncertain about her instincts. Other friends who had met Sophia and seemed somehow diminished afterward. You're stealing their essence. I'm appreciating their gifts more than they ever did. That's when I realized the true horror of my situation. Sophia hadn't chosen me randomly. She'd selected me specifically for my traits, my stories, my perspective. Everything about our relationship had been calculated to extract maximum value from my personality. What happens to me when you're done collecting? She smiled with what I now recognized as Marcus's mischievous grin filtered through Lisa's analytical coldness. You'll continue to exist, of course. You'll just be less than you were before. Think of it as making a donation to a worthy cause. I left her apartment that night, but I could already feel the effects beginning. My confidence was shaken, my sense of self uncertain. Over the following weeks, as Sophia continued to contact me, trying to schedule more dates and extraction sessions, I noticed changes in myself. My photography felt flat, uninspired. Stories I'd told dozens of times suddenly seemed boring even to me. My sense of humor felt forced, my insights shallow. It wasn't just heartbreak or relationship anxiety. It was as if the most interesting parts of my personality were fading, being drained away by someone who had studied them, copied them, and somehow claimed ownership of them. I started avoiding mutual friends, afraid they would notice that I'd become a pale imitation of my former self. Marcus seemed to be recovering some of his wit, and Lisa was regaining her creative confidence. But I continued to feel increasingly empty, like a photocopy of a photocopy that had lost all clarity and definition. The worst part is that Sophia was right about one thing. She did improve on what she took. When I saw her at a gallery opening months later, she moved through the space with a version of my artistic eye that was somehow more refined, more confident than my own had ever been. She was wearing my aesthetic sense like perfectly tailored clothing, while I stood in the corner feeling like a tourist in my own area of expertise. She noticed me and approached with a smile that combined the best elements of everyone she'd ever absorbed. Andrew, how wonderful to see you. You look well, but we both knew I didn't. I looked diminished, faded, like a sketch of someone who had once been fully realized. I wanted to thank you, she said quietly. Your contributions to my collection have been invaluable. I use your perspective on beauty almost daily. Give it back. Oh darling, that's not how it works. Those traits belong to me now. I've refined them, improved them, made them part of something greater. You should be proud. She kissed my cheek with lips that had learned tenderness from a dozen different lovers and walked away, leaving me standing there as hollow as she claimed to have once been. I don't date anymore. How can I risk meeting another collector, another emotional parasite who sees personality traits as commodities to be harvested? How can I trust my instincts when I'm not sure what's left of my authentic self? Sometimes I wonder if everyone is a collector to some degree, absorbing mannerisms and traits from people they admire. But most people do it unconsciously, naturally, as part of normal human connection. Sophia was different. She was deliberate, systematic, predatory, and somewhere out there she's still collecting, still building herself from the stolen essence of others, still leaving a trail of diminished souls who gave away the best parts of themselves to someone who promised to love them, but only wanted to own them. The scariest part isn't that she exists, it's that there might be others like her, skilled at identifying and extracting what makes us unique, leaving us wondering why we feel so empty, so much less than we used to be. If you meet someone who seems too interested in every detail of your personality, who absorbs your traits with unsettling efficiency, who makes you feel fascinating while somehow becoming more fascinating herself, run before she takes so much of who you are that you can't remember who you were supposed to be.